Welcome to Integrative Preparedness. I'm Steve Smith. The guru's not here today. He's in school, and so I'm holding this myself and don't have a mic on, so hopefully I'll talk loud enough for you to be able to hear. A couple of things have happened recently that made me think that maybe I should do this. First off, I want to thank everybody who's subscribed to the channel, both the YouTube. It's been growing like I didn't expect, and and also the Patreon that I never really expected to do anything with that, but um, I've had some people join up, and I really appreciate it. I thank all of you for that. I'm finding that I enjoy this, and I really enjoy the comments and the communications that I've had from so many people. A lot of times I get emails that don't show up in the comments because I put my email in my books. I don't know if they're in all of the books or just a couple, but anyway, they're in there. And I want to thank everybody who's taken the time to send me an email and share with me a little bit about yourselves. And uh, and I've had some questions. People have asked me some questions that I kind of declined to answer. And it's just because of my normal hesitancy to get into details, and it's probably a lot of my background. I think I'm just like that. But I thought it would probably be helpful if I told you a little bit more about myself, help you to understand maybe where I'm coming from, what I'm talking about, you know. And so I've thought about it, and then I'm going to say something about Patreon too after I kind of give this intro. I know that I mentioned this in a previous, and I think I'm looking the right place on this camera or on this phone. I've mentioned this a little bit, I think, on a previous uh, uh, video. I've kind of been involved in preparedness all of my life. Well, I really have. My family used to own a bunch of farms down in central Missouri, and from the time I was just I don't know, 8 or so, my dad would take me down there, and he taught me to throw a knife and an axe and shoot a bow and arrow and go out in the woods and track and things like that. And I was just always interested and enamored in survival and living off the land and things like that. And of course, back in the 50s and 60s, the people that lived on farms still were, extremely, well, at least the ones that I'm familiar with, were extremely self-sufficient. When they had to drive into town, it was either probably to go see the doctor or visit some friends or have lunch, on a Sunday in the town square restaurant is kind of a special deal. So they were self-sufficient. So I saw that lifestyle, and I saw the benefits and really the quality of life in those people. And so I've always been attracted to that. Now, I wasn't a farm guy, and I wasn't although I did raise horses later on, but that was on my family's farms. And I still lived in the city. I was really more of a city guy. But always kept up my interest in survival and preparedness and things like that. I went on the police department in a large city when I was 21 years old. Um, Enjoyed it. I was a city guy, knew the city, bounced around a lot, uh, mostly stayed out of trouble. But back then, most of us on the police departments, and I'm going to have more to say about law enforcement probably on another video. But most of us back then that went on the police departments, we hadn't gone to college. We didn't go to college. We came off the streets. We were guys who knew the streets and kind of, we're used to mixing it up on the streets. It was a very different time. And going into either the fire department or the police department was something that was just natural for a lot of us who stayed at least enough on the right side of the law until we hit 21 that we could. I got crosswise of a captain on the police department. I didn't like him at all, and he didn't like me much. And so I decided it was time to make a career change. And I went on to the sheriff's department, a major sheriff's department of that same county, and it was a much better fit for me. It was still kind of the old Wild West feeling about it. and it opened a lot of opportunities to me that probably wouldn't have been there on the police department, because the sheriff's departments were, well, they're different. I won't get into that, but did my time on the road and a little bit out in the counties, and most of the time I rode what they call the city district. It was in the city. It was just kind of a ghetto, that unincorporated area that nobody wanted. There wasn't any tax base there. There wasn't any other criminals that lived there, so the county took care of it, and I fit in real well and had a good time. I did my years there, and then went. They formed a multi-agency drug squad. They called it an anti-narcotics unit, and I went in there. It was the time that, and I'll get in more to this on others, because it is kind of interesting, and it kind of speaks to some of the things that are happening today. Um, when we left Vietnam, um, when the United States left Vietnam, for the most part, um, it dried up a major um, channel for narcotics out of Southeast Asia. The heroin, known as China White, and other things that came out of the Burma, Laos, and Thailand triangle there, the Golden Triangle they called it. They kind of dried out, and then it left a big hole um, in the druggies, needs. And so then it started being replaced by some low-grade heroin coming up out of Mexico called Mexican Brown, and then later on, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this. I am going to go into some detail on the Patreon channel later on, but anyway, that's when I went into undercover narcotics. I went in as an undercover. Worked for a while. Worked about 18 months. Starting off with some of the bike clubs, the motorcycle clubs, gangs, whatever. Really interesting time. Might talk about that on Patreon. Probably not on here. And then I went on, and then things were evolving in the narcotics and in the global narcotics trafficking, and I went into a couple of federal task force. Well, one a strike force, and then another a task force, and then something else. And it was one of those things you lovingly called OGA, which stands for Other Government Agency, which is what you say when you either can't or don't want to say who you're really working for. And there were times really that I always knew the name that was on my check, but it got so convoluted that sometimes we didn't know exactly who we were working for at any given time. I had gone into this as a true believer and thought that there was, that it would be, well, that we should try to stop the drug trade. And I believed in the system at the time. I came to think differently. I saw that actually the so-called war on drugs was nothing more than a jobs program for cops, and I'll go into more on that on a Patreon channel, not here. I became very disillusioned and left short of retirement. And from there I went on and I ran my own businesses. I owned a gym for a number of years. I taught defensive tactics, combatives, self-defense, martial arts for a number of years. I published a martial arts magazine, Grandmaster magazine, because when I saw what had happened to martial arts, it was just full of, well, what I call pajama dancers. It seems like you drive down, any street, and there'll be some strip mall with a bunch of people jumping around in there in their gis. Nobody learned anything that has anything to do with self-defense or actually combatives, but I learned a whole lot of junk, and as long as, I guess you have to be 10 or 11 or 12 years old to get your black belt, as long as your parents' checks don't bounce along the way, because that's certainly what I see plenty of. Anyway, I saw what had happened to martial arts, and became disgusted with it, so I started publishing a magazine, Grandmaster magazine, and it wasn't for those kind of people. Those kind of people hated it because I called a lot of people out, and I met some of the real ass kickers, and I saw there were some real ones around, and I was very happy to kind of find my way home and to see some legitimate guys in the world. So I had a great time with that. Um, I'm going to probably on the Patreon channel because, and I thought of, and well, maybe I should bring you up to speed here. Um, so I did that for quite a while, then did other things, owned my own businesses. My wife and I run a couple of our own businesses. She and I worked together on pretty much everything. I didn't meet the woman I wanted to marry till I was 48 years old, or 47. I think married her when I was 49, and I had my first youngin when I was 53 or something like that. Um, God knew what He was doing when He made me wait, because not sure I would have done that good a job when I was younger. Um, the My wife and I spend so much time together, always have. Somebody asked her one time years ago, well, don't gosh, you guys spend so much time together. Isn't that hard on your marriage? She said, we could have fun digging ditches together, and that's the truth. That really is. We work a lot on the same things. I work on other things, and she's very supportive, and she works on other things, and I'm very supportive, and we just have a great time. And we kind of raise our kids in an entrepreneurial um, spirit, and they're all already, starting their own things, which I do suggest, and I'll talk more about that in another. I see I have a glare on here. I hope that hasn't been bothering you all. Maybe I'm hoping that I'm holding this thing wrong. Anyway, I'll try to do a little bit better. Excuse me while I get a sip here. And you'll probably be hearing a little bit more about the businesses because they'll be the subject of some future videos. Anyway, so that's just the basics of me, that maybe will give you a little bit better understanding of where I'm coming from, where I get my experience, where I get my opinions. Uh, and I don't teach martial arts anymore, I should say. I just, first off, I found that the quality of person that was coming to want to learn martial arts was declining. I did enjoy teaching fighters. I taught a number of well, back in the days when pancreation was starting up, we were involved in that, and that was very enjoyable. But I don't have much patience with people who want to just bounce around and try to act tough and do it for the wrong reasons. And that's a subject for a whole other video probably too. So I don't do that anymore. I'm basically, I write my books, and I love spending time with the family and relaxing and such as that. Now, to the next. So I hope that's given you a little bit of answers to some of the questions that I've gotten here in the last few months. Uh, if there's something else, feel free to ask. I can't promise that I will answer. Um, they're just stuff I don't talk about, and I don't mean that to sound overly dramatic. It's I come from a generation we didn't write books about what we did, and to this day I don't talk about the specifics. I'm sorry, you're getting the sun right in your eyes. I'm going to move that around, and I still don't talk about the specifics of things. But if if there's a generality or my opinion that I can give that came from one of these, then I'll get into that. Now, Patreon. When I first started Patreon, and I was surprised. I never thought that anybody would want to, pay $1 to see what I'm putting up there, because I hadn't. I'm sorry. I'm going to try to figure this out. Okay. The sun is going back behind me. I didn't think that I would put anything on Patreon that I don't put on YouTube. Um, and somebody in a comment said, well, you ought to put something on Patreon because these people are paying, and I thought about that, and my son said the same thing, and my wife just told me, well, yes, I've always thought that you ought to put some of the other stuff on Patreon because those people are paying you. And then it occurred to me that there were a lot of things that I thought were probably interesting to people, and probably should be shared. I mean, there's lessons in them, but that I didn't want to put up on YouTube. And then, of course, Flash, right? I finally realized sometimes I just have to wait till things come to me. I realized, well, these are the things that I should put on Patreon. So I will be putting things on Patreon here, probably starting, um, in a week or so, maybe. I'll shoot for a week, and if it's 2 weeks, I won't feel bad. Um, so I will be putting stuff on Patreon. But first off, thank you all. For those of you who have patronized the Patreon channel, thank you so much. I never anticipated that anybody would, and it's just great. I appreciate it. So for that, I'm going to start putting other stuff up on there, and it will have to do with the things that I just don't want to share here amongst the general population, as it were, of YouTube. And it'll probably have to do with it'll have to do with real stuff in real life. Um, a little bit about gunfighting. I'm not gonna go on there and try to teach people how to shoot. You don't do that on video, but some things, some realities about gunfighting, some realities about combatives, some realities about those violent interchanges between people that can be talked about to death but never understood unless you've done them, and are sadly taught by many people out there who haven't done them, which just leaves the subsequent generations there of being farther and farther separated from reality. I might, and it just occurred to me that I might interview some friends of mine who will also bring, in some ways similar and some ways slightly different experiences that I have had, and might interview them on Patreon. And I think you'll enjoy hearing from some of them, and you're going to get some reality spooned out in